Katie and Peter here. And today's esoteric word, we will be discussing John 17:20 through 21, where we'll tap into the understanding of the divine symphony, unveiling oneness through this passage. And in this, we'll be discovering a profound revelation of unity. And so the passage goes, "Neither pray I for these alone, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word, that they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me." So, Peter, this is more than just a simple prayer. It talks about the cosmic unity and cosmic coherence. So would you be open to explaining how that is connected and how we can read into this a little deeper?
Absolutely. So if we break down the scriptures, it says that I pray that they might be one just as you and I are one. And so what Christ is expressing here is the unity with his higher self, which he calls the Father. And so in esotericism, what the Father is what we call the monad. Each one of us have an individualized God self. And the same monad is the same attribute that is also referred to as the I am. And that's why Christ also said that before Abraham was I am. The I am came even before Abraham. Before anything was incarnated on earth, there was always the I am, because the I am is the individualized expression of each one of us. So he's praying to the Father, he's praying to his I am, his God self, the monad, that each one of us might also gain our own unity with our I am. So each one of us might also incarnate our Christ self. Remember that Yeshua, Jesus, brought into the physical embodiment the Christ, and the Christ is the third aspect. So we have the I am, we have the causal, and we have the Christ. So he incarnated the Christ attribute, and he's praying that each one of us will also incarnate our Christ attribute by becoming one. Wholeness means that individuals typically are fragmented in consciousness, meaning that most people don't recognize themselves as souls, which is actually the first level of awakening. The average person recognizes themselves as, or thinks about themselves as just a human consciousness, meaning that they live more in the three-dimensional world.
Okay, so I do want to elaborate just a little bit on that, and thank you so much, Peter. So looking at this beautiful diagram, we start at, so talking about consciousness, Christ and Buddha were the two that sat at the top 1,000 Christ consciousness. And then you go down, and if you look up Power versus Force with David Hawking, he really goes into this. And so as we raise up our levels, so if we're in like fear, then we're down lower in those 0 to 100, right? And then we go to despair. And actually, anger is above despair because that's when we actually go into action. And then we go into neutrality. And then thinking about, Peter, what you were talking about is the I am presence. And so what I'm understanding is that as we say this prayer, that I am presence is something that we can attain. And through this prayer, we can start, and through different practices and principles, we can start to see how to embody that Christ consciousness ourselves. And by saying these prayers, really brings that to the here and now, because it reminds us, it activates different things within our brain to remind us how we truly want to be in the moment. I really love science and spirituality. And so oftentimes I ask people in my practice, what is your spiritual life like? And so, Peter, I know that we didn't necessarily talk about this in this way, but looking at the divine pattern of perfection, and what is the divine pattern of perfection? What does that mean? And also, are there spiritual practices, which could be like meditation or prayer, and lots more than that? Are there practices that we can use to start to embody that I am presence and create that unity within ourselves?
Absolutely. The key thing is that the person has to have a desire, first of all, because it's the desire that attracts the teacher or the teaching. An individual has to desire that they want to be whole, and then they have to find the true teaching. And we teach pretty much the ascended masters. And with that, the person, an individual, will have strong affirmations, affirming themselves. Christ was always saying, I am the resurrection and the life. So, constantly on a daily basis, an individual will keep repeating to themselves that they are the I am that I am. However, in reality, most people don't spend so much time in their minds thinking about the affirmations because they are stuck in the ego, meaning that the thoughts are always more projected towards the self, the desires of the self. And so some of the practices, in Taoist teaching that we recognize or that we advise is always like the thought window principle that helps a person to constantly reflect and have the awareness of what is going on through the psyche, being aware of when thoughts arise and when feelings arise in order to use the right principles to pick the right thoughts. If the thought is discordant, if the thought is not positive, if it's not the highest and the best, we are then going to shift the thought, redefine the thought. So when we think about the container of a person's mind, an individual's mind, it's filled with emotions, thought forms, and memories. And those, let's call them entities, cloud the mind. And so an individual doesn't have the space, the bandwidth to do affirmations until they have done the work of the cleansing or purification of their lower bodies. So the first step always is to find practices and principles that enable the person to release the discordant energies. We also use, violet flame in our prayers to transmute discordant energies in the lower body system. That release then gives an individual the freedom to be able to choose the right thoughts. And with that then comes the affirmation. But we recognize that this is a daily practice. And the key thing that drives the practice is the attention. Where is a person's attention focused? On a daily basis, when our attention is focused more on our third eye or on our heart center, or both third eye and heart center, it keeps a person grounded and centered, so that irrespective of um, activities that take place in life or impulses, a person can always return to their center. Another important strategy or practice that enables a person to gain union of being or union with their I am self, their God self, is constant introspection. Through introspection, we can review and see if there are any moments in a day or through time that we have, you know so to speak, we have let the gates open and allowed some thoughts, we have planted some seed thoughts that will create discord in our being, and then we can transmute them.
With that being said, really quick, I do want to give a real life example. So one day I was riding my bike with my dog and I thought, I'm so overwhelmed. And then I realized that the more that I say that, the more that I'm going to attract it. And we'll come back to the I am. And I actually just in this moment realized that that's what I had said. And when I recognized what I was saying, I realized that I was going to keep perpetuating this overwhelm. And so when I realized that self awareness of what I was telling myself, I was able to shift it to, I have so many opportunities. And then it shifts the energy that we're living at. So we go from that of fear and overwhelm to, okay, I've got this, I can do it. And so, Peter, also, would you be willing to elaborate on what happens when we state, like, I am ADHD, I am amazing and on top of the world? What happens when we say things like that?
Absolutely. So the first thing is the recognition that I am is the name of God, and I am is our identity. And also, I am is the creative principle. What that means is that um, when an individual says I am, they are creating, they're manifesting. And what they manifest is a thought form that then acts as a program that drives their system, drives the follow-up bodies. So if a person proclaims I am something and that thing is an illusion that they are not, they will create a discordant energy in their lower bodies. And that dense energy brings down their vibration. Anytime a person uses the word I am, they're taking the energy that God has given to each one of us. Remember that it says the love of the God and the message of God are new every morning. God gives us every morning a deposit of energy, like in our bank account, saying take some money, go out and spend it. And every time a person uses the word I am, they're taking that energy and creating something with that energy. And so a person can take the money, the energy that God has given them, and buy fast food, for example, or buy healthy food. So buying fast food means that we're buying something that is dense in energy. When it's dense in energy, what happens is that it brings down the vibration. When it brings down a person's vibration, people then begin to feel like victims, having depression, anxiety, worries, and all of those things that programs the lower system. So the I am is a powerful, the name of God, and it's the creative principle. Anything we add after that manifests into our reality. So we, as we become more awake and aware, and we've done the work of the inner purification and cleansing, every time we hear the word I am, the name, we recognize it and we pause, before we say I am, or when we hear someone else say I am, we recognize that that person is manifesting or creating.
And remembering to give ourselves compassion as we're growing because we're bound to, we have to make steps to grow. So it takes time. So with that, as we start to cultivate that and deepen that relationship with our inner self, our higher selves, the different layers, and knowing that the answers are within, and we can do these different practices on our own, and sometimes outwardly find people to help us, like the archetypal awakening work that we do is designed to help us find that observer self. And as we find that observer self, I believe that that's how we start to begin that more of that fusing of like living in the 3D and the 5D in balance, because we're able to be here on the earthly realm, but also tapping into that inner nature and that inner union. So I really love what you have here written as instead of atonement, at one-ment. And so, which is beautiful, and I love that it's one and the same. So I'm going to read this part of the scripture. As thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us. So would you be willing to elaborate on at one-ment and the I am and creating that deeper divine union?
Absolutely. So when we visualize what it means to be in the Father, the each one of us were like onions, the Russian doll, right? It's a doll within a doll within a doll within a doll. So when they say, Father, I am in you and you are in me, it means that the version of ourselves that we experience as personality is contained within our higher self, the largest doll, so to speak. Same thing with the onion. You can use an onion as an example as well. And what happens to the soul when we descend, when we come outside of source? Let's imagine source is the infinite ocean of possibilities that's all around us. And source has an idea. I want to experience being a human, and my theme is to learn about peace and righteousness, and love and power. And boop, we come out of the source as an individualized aspect of the soul. The first aspect that comes out of the source is what we call the I am. It's like, oh, I am peace. That comes out of the source. And then it descends all the way down into the lower dimension to experience humanity. Now, this is just an abbreviation of how the whole process of the descent. And we have a different course where we talk about the soul's descent. So what happens is that as the soul experiences different lifetime, reincarnation or cyclic existence is another thing that is important. People who are seekers of truth need to do their own research to recognize cyclic existence as a reality. Some teachings in Christianity or some other teachings might not talk so much about cyclic existence, reincarnation, but it's important for people to do their research. And so, as the soul lives lifetime after lifetime, it begins to create fragmentation of fragments because of the use of the I am several times, misqualifying, I am a boy, I am a girl, I am a this, creating objectification of our subjective experience, and meaning that we are calling ourselves the experience as opposed to the observer of the experience. We are
Mm.
fusing ourselves with the experience itself. We are becoming the character as opposed to the user of the character. So there is then created the illusion of separation between what we truly are and what we're truly observing or what we are truly acting out. And so, what Christ is praying is that each one of us may begin to remember, as opposed, and the word remember means to bring our members back together, like realign, remembering, bringing all of the aspects of ourselves together as one. So he's praying that we remember, we come back together, all of the fragments of ourselves that we have trapped in time, different lifetimes, in this current lifetime, and we can gain unity of being by returning to our original state, which is I am. Our original state is the first principle that came out of the source, God. And when we come back to that original state, we walk on the earth with our bodies that we, not just our physical bodies, but with the body we call our Christ self. We become a Christ. Um, just like a person can say, I am a human, a person can say, I'm a soul, a person can say, I'm a Christ. It means that they have incarnated, they have identified themselves with their Christ self because they have become the I am.
That's beautiful. So, looking at the next part of the notes, the call to synthesis, bridging all separation. So, I'm going to go into a little bit about what we teach, and we are launching a course on August 8th. It's going to begin Lionsgate. If you want to check it out, you can check it out at Tiny URL, and the URL, the name is Embodify. So what we're talking about on there, and I will put in the links below the comments, um, is like we're talking about what you're saying, Peter, is finding that one, that observer self. So, like, say that something happens, and so this moment I may play a victim, or this moment I may play um, a lover, or I may play a creator. And so seeing that I play all these different roles, and maybe if I'm in that victim child role, I may push out my warrior role, and they may just all be in fight and conflict within ourselves. And so as we can start to create coherence between them, and they start to talk with each other, that's how we can start to create union within ourselves. And so I do want to talk about like seeing all the different roles we play, and is that who we truly are, or are those just conditions that have been placed on us from our upbringing? And then also tapping into the maybe a little bit of the masculine and feminine, and the law of polar union.
Yeah. So when we think about polar union or polarization, it's really the law of magnetic attraction. And like Katie, you explained that the fragmentation of our consciousness is both vertical and horizontal. We can think about it like the cross. The vertical fragmentation of our consciousness is recognizing that we are physical, etheric, emotional, mental, soul level, which soul is connected to etheric, Christ, a causal, I am, and our white fire body. That's our horizontal, sorry, our vertical. And then our horizontal is the archetypes, the 12 archetypes that we play. So we play, of course, the child, the orphan, the warrior, the caregiver, the nurturer, the sage, the creator, the magician, and what have you, the free spirited, or the fool. And this union of polarizations is coming together, bridging all of the disparate aspects of ourselves, both the vertical and the horizontal, and bringing them into oneness. In the inner boardroom, all of the aspects that are opposites We have lower vibration and we have higher vibration. We have our four lower bodies and we have our higher self. We're bringing that into union. And then in the horizontal, we have our shadow and our light, and we're bringing that into union as well. So the polarization or the law of polar union is bringing, removing the illusion of separation between the ups and the down, the left and the right, the good and the bad, so to speak, because there isn't really good and bad, it's just the shadows. And it's just unconsciousness in essence. So it's fusion of duality. Duality is an illusion that there is separation. In actuality, everything is one. Reality is one. We've only mistaken energy and misqualified it. And when we misqualify energy, we create the reverse polarity or polarization.
Beautiful. Cool. So thank you for bringing that all together. And earlier you were talking about like I am, and then we become whatever we say after that. And so going into the next space, thinking about like placebos. Again, I love science and spirituality. And when you look at when you take a placebo pill, it if we believe it's going to work, it's going to work. And I think that the numbers are like astronomically high, like 80% of like antidepressants are placebos. And I do need to fact check myself on that one. However, just knowing that the brain is that powerful is so phenomenal. And it goes into the crucial role of believers. And so, A, being a believer, and then also looking at that bridge to higher consciousness. And as a collective, as we come together and we have these conversations. So, I'm going to tap on three things, and I know you've got this. So, the role of being a believer, the intuition and that brain mind bridge that are to our higher consciousness, and then the power of the collective.
Absolutely. So being a believer or being a disciple is a person who has committed themselves, made a decision to follow after a path. Um, and it's pivotal to follow a practice because it keeps one consistent and not falling asleep. The role of a believer is to be the light, be a beacon, be someone who is ready to let go of the lower self, let go of the illusion of this dream. The material world is just a dream because anything that has a beginning and has an end is an illusion. If it doesn't begin and has an end, it's temporary. And anytime consciousness attaches itself to something that is temporary, it leads to suffering. So a believer is one who has found a path and is walking that path circumspectly. The idea of the mind, body, and intuition, or mind, body, and the soul, is the ability for a person to transmute light from the soul dimension, from the spirit dimension, into the physical being, into their consciousness. It means that the person, individual, has infused higher vibrating thought forms into their lower selves. They're not thinking in their mind, so to speak, only just the mundane thought. Like an average person every day, is just thinking about, oh, I have to go to work, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to pay this. But a person who is so realized is thinking, what happens after this reality? What's next after this reality? Who truly am I beyond the character? And with that, the individual is finding is a true seeker and is recognizing who truly they are and infusing the light of the truth of who they are, I am, into their brain, and that infusion creates the healing. That infusion creates transformation within their lower bodies. They're having truth about nature of reality, that everything is God, everything is vibrating around us, all things are consciousness, and consciousness is an intelligence that can be qualified by our thoughts and by our feelings, and we're all created beings. So that's the infusion, and then from the soul level, the person receives, of course, regular downloads from their higher self or from their guides. Each one of us have, as we souls incarnate into this material dimension, God doesn't leave us as orphans. Our higher self doesn't leave us as orphans into this jungle of the dream, but brings with itself, or with us, guide to guide us through the path, an angel that says, I'll always be with you, I'll never leave you, and I'll teach you. So we connect also with our guides, and we connect also with the elementals around us. Um, and consciousness, conscious soul functioning, and the power of group work. The power of group work is the ability for individuals to raise the vibration of the planet, or raise the vibration of a specific place. It could be a place of worship, by having pure intentions. They come together with a pure intention and continue to offer that intention and attention, so that in that area there is higher vibration. Anyone who comes there can then experience true nature, as opposed to experiencing depression or anxiety or suffering. A person is elevated in their level of consciousness. If we think about ourselves as like batteries, and our level of consciousness is our battery level. When the battery level is low, is depleted because we've used a lot of the energy to think, or because there are a lot of dense thoughts in consciousness, the battery level becomes low and people feel like victims. They complain about what's happening in the world, the government, blah blah blah. They will not see themselves as creators of experience, but they will recognize themselves as a victim of the dream of the matrix.
Yes, and I really like. I'm going to go backwards here with again David Hawking in Power versus Force. He talks about only 15% of us need to raise our vibration to impact the other 85%. So as we're doing the work, like this says, as I am in you and you are in me, and we all start to raise the consciousness, it starts to ripple effect and automatically impact the others, which is beautiful. And they do also have scientific research on that. And when you talk about tapping in with our inner guides, I like to think that God doesn't yell, our guides don't yell, they whisper. So we have to slow down and actually be listening and be present. Sometimes it's a sign, like yesterday, there were several words that were being repeated, and today, and even last night, I was like, oh, that's a sign I should take this course. And I was like, no, it's just a sign that everything's right. It doesn't have to be a sign that we're supposed to do this. It just means we're on the right path. And if we're slowed down enough, we can actually see it. And so looking at what you're talking about is activating in the brain, our reticular activating system. So if I start to say, this is the way that I want to be in life, and I want to be more soul aligned than uh, like more relational than transactional would be a really great way to explain it. Having that relationship with ourselves and those around us, instead of just going to be somebody and get successful and blah, 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 those worldly things that we go to achieve. We activate our reticular activating system, so a portion of our brain that then starts to find those things naturally. We only see what we're looking for, and a great example is when you buy a brand new car, all of a sudden you see those cars everywhere because your reticular activating system has been activated. And so that's what we're doing when we're starting to talk to ourselves about bridging this consciousness. And when we're getting those nudges and those ideas from the divine, from our higher selves, from our guides, if our energy centers are misaligned, and if we're like worried about our mortgage and our boyfriend and our child and all these things, rather than being in faith and like that center, then what happens is we can't actually actualize those ideas. And so that's the importance of being aligned, is that we can then connect with one another. We can see those gifts around us, and we can see those opportunities, those people that are bringing us to those places where we're going. And and so it's really important to do the work to meditate or pray, whatever it is that you want to call it, and both have different attributes to them. And doing that trauma healing work and just really having that self-awareness and reflection. And then lastly, we began with talking about the path, and just knowing that there's no one way to get there. Peter and I study a lot of different types of spiritual practices and pathways because all of them have light and truth in them. So really listening to yourself. And at the foundation of every spiritual practice and religion is love. And so just knowing that, like Peter said earlier, when you come into a discordant emotion, a feeling that's like doesn't feel good, then tap into your heart and tap into your third eye and create that coherence. Give yourself time to breathe and to listen to your inner self and that inner guidance. And sometimes we do have to look outside of ourselves to find those answers. And truly, when we do, at all times, checking back within. Do you have anything to elaborate on in anything that was just said?
Yeah, just in the interest of yeah, the length of our video, so trying to keep them short constantly. Yeah, the point you made about recognizing divine love as being the glue that holds everything together, and it's when an individual thinks of life from that perspective, it takes away fear because you recognize that you are held by your higher self. We are held by everything around us. There is no separation. Our, ascended beings and guides are constantly with us. And so when we face difficulties or trials or tribulations or challenges, divine love for oneself and for everyone around makes a person recognize that there is always help available. So there is no need to be in fear or in worry or in doubt, knowing that all things work together for good. Um, and so when the thoughts arise of illusion or self-doubt, we're able to transform them, transmute them by divine love. So that's what I picked up on. Yeah.
Beautiful. I think that's a really great way to pull all this together. And I will read the conclusion. So, in essence, John 17:20-21, viewed through the esoteric lens, is a powerful prayer for the conscious, fully realized and tangibly manifested unity of all individuals with their divine I Am presence. Through this profound internal at-one-ment, humanity is called to unite with each other and ultimately with the planetary logos, which we'll go into what that means another time. This internal harmony, diligently nurtured through dedicated spiritual practice and applied in selfless service and harmonious group interaction, is the very means by which the Christ principle is externalized on earth. It is the pathway that empowers the world to recognize, embrace, and actively participate in the magnificent divine plan for all of creation. So when we look at Christ, he had done the internal work so that he could express himself outwardly with all of his gifts and his truth. And that's where we're all going to. And so as we do this work, remember it takes time, compassion, and patience. So be compassionate with yourself and give yourself time to make these changes. And lastly, being in a community of people that are heart-centered and that help us see. We all have blind spots, and how do we help each other see those blind spots? Do we point fingers, or do we gently help, nudgingly guide one another to see them themselves, ourselves? So I look forward to continuing to grow together with all of you. And do you have any parting words before we head out?
No.
Okay. Much love, everyone. And feel free to put any comments in there that you might want to see, any type of topics that you want to see us have in the future, and make sure to like and subscribe so that you are let known when we're going to go live. Thank you again for following us, and much love.